So, in 1986, Star Trek released a movie called The Voyage Home. It was a little odd. It was about time travel and kidnapping whales. In any case, the Enterprise goes back in time to present-day Earth, circa 1986. And they run into a few adventures in which one of the crew members gets injured pretty badly. He falls from a high place and he gets sent to the security wing of a hospital. He's under guard by the police. So Kirk and Dr. McCoy have to go rescue him from this hospital. Upon entering the hospital, Dr. McCoy sees an old lady and he asks her what's wrong. She says she's undergoing some kind of kidney dialysis, in which case McCoy says something along the lines of, "Is this the Dark Ages?" He's commenting on present-day medicine and technology. Remember, he's got a perspective from the future, so everything to him is backwards and a little bit old-fashioned. They end up in an elevator, Kirk and McCoy, and they're overhearing a conversation by two young doctors. These are young doctors, right out of medical school. And they're talking about chemotherapy. So when McCoy overhears this conversation, he likens it to the Spanish Inquisition. And he's not commenting on the doctors or their knowledge. He's commenting on the actual practice. There's a process in place that to him is very, very backward and almost inconceivable. And when they finally get the checkoff, the doctors there are going to perform some kind of cranial operation in which they're going to put holes in his skull to relieve pressure. And Dr. McCoy isn't having any of that. Again, it's not a comment on the doctors or their knowledge. It's a comment of really the processes of the time. The doctors aren't to blame. The doctors are just doing what they learned from older, wiser doctors. That's the way the knowledge transfer works, right? You have established people who have processes in place, and they basically share their knowledge with a younger generation. So when I first started building guitars, the story does have a point. When I started building guitars, I was a guitar player who wanted to build guitars. I didn't have any woodworking background. I didn't have any machining background. And as a guitar player, when I was learning to build guitars, I got to the point where I was starting to fret. So I bought my brand new, beautiful fret wire. I bought a radius jig. I radiused my beautiful, brand new fret wire. I hammered it in place, and I'm like, okay, what's the next step? So I go online, check out YouTube, and I was horrified to see what the next step was. You have these established guitar builders using a beam with sanding paper, and they're grinding down those brand new, perfectly radiused frets. And just like McCoy, I thought it was a little bit barbaric. So I always thought there has to be a better way, but I could never figure it out. I was a brand new guitar builder, so I did what everybody does. I grabbed a beam and I leveled those frets. And I did that for 3 necks, and then I told myself I have to stop. There has to be a better way. There has to be. I never found that way. I never found an elegant solution to leveling frets without grinding them down. I'm going to leave that up to you, to any young builder who's out there who might have better, more clever ideas than us. I never got very far with trying to find a different or more elegant solution. In any case, I actually do level my frets. The thumbnail's a little bit clickbaity, maybe 50%, maybe 30% clickbaity. So let's just go through my process. Let's see what it looks like, and let's find out exactly what I do. So I've already filed down the edges of the frets, and I've taped off the fretboard. I haven't done a bevel on these, nor have I cleaned up the little burrs on the corner of each fret. This is just ready to go through my data-driven fret leveling system. So the first thing that most people do is they grab their marker and they mark the tops and then they level the frets. But we're not going to do that. So what I propose is we first use a fret rocker and actually have data that lets us know which frets require leveling. So the first thing I'm going to do is use the fret rocker across the board, and instead of using a black magic marker to color the top, I'm going to use two colors. We'll use the red color to indicate that the fret portion requires leveling, and the black color to indicate that it does not. That's what we're going to do across the board. So I'll do the first ones. So here's my fret rocker. This is just I think this is the first gen Crimson Guitars fret rocker I got a couple of years ago. And I'm on the first, second, and third fret. And right there, none of those frets, at least the first two frets, are going to require leveling. There's a little bit of a rock here, a little bit of rock here, and then it disappears up here. So there's no rock up here. So from here to there, it requires leveling, but from here to here, it does not. And these do not require leveling. So what I also do is I transfer this data onto the tape in case I need to refer to it if the mark on the fret goes away. So I'm going to put a black line here, and also up here to indicate that these two frets do not require leveling and the top of this does not require leveling. Only the bottom does. And I'm going to repeat this process across the board. So 3, 4, 5, 5, 6, 7 is the same thing. There's no rock on top, but there's a rock on the bottom. So I'm going to mark this off. And the beauty of this is that you start to see patterns emerge. I'm going to transfer this data onto the tape. I'm going to transfer the red that requires it on the tape too. Because as we're leveling, the marker will come off, but we can always know that this fret still requires or required leveling based on the data that's on the tape. So far, I don't know if you can see this, already I'm not leveling the entire board and I'm not having to crown every single fret. These 3 frets so far will not require crowning. That's incredible. If someone told you when you were doing your fret job that you could actually remove 3 frets from that process, that would be great news. I do not have to touch these. I'm only going to polish them. And polishing is with the Dremel, so that's super easy. It's not even considered work. So these already are not going to be leveled, and the tops of these are not going to be leveled. I'm only going to level the ones that require them. Now I'm going to do this across the board, but already you're asking, well, how are you going to level these? The answer is I'm going to spot level them. And I'm going to spot level them with this. This is the StewMac Fret Kisser. It is essentially identical to a fret rocker, only it's designed so that there is this diamond grinding portion in the middle. So you put it on the frets that require it. You can see it rocks, or maybe you can't hear it, but it's rocking. And then you simply just grind. And again, this is fairly quick, as quick as sandpaper on your leveling beam, but I'm only doing it in the spots that is required to do it. And then I only need to crown these spots. I don't have to crown the entire thing. And so already, if I do this across the board, there's far less work to do. And more importantly, I maintain the original crown of the frets that don't require leveling. They stay in their original extruded shape. That's it. So I'm just going to do this across the board. So clearly there's a threshold, right? If a certain number of these frets required leveling that were more than the ones that didn't, then you would just level the whole board. That makes a lot of sense. But in this case, there are 15 frets that don't need any type of grinding. That's a huge number. So we're going to spot level, and we're going to spot level using the fret kisser. So I'm just going to go through like this and grind, and then we'll come through and crown, and then we'll polish the whole thing. And that should give us not only a perfect fretboard, but one where we didn't have to grind down these frets. They maintain their original extruded shape. Now I'm using Jescar fret wire, and there's a reason. So far, they're the only company that I've found that publishes the tolerances of their fret wire on the internet. So that means they're showing you plus or minus what the height is going to be and how accurate it is. No one else is doing that. And I think that's one of the reasons why we have to grind our frets. Because think about it this way. Think about a perfect world. A perfect world where we have a CNC machine that can perfectly machine a radius on a fretboard very accurately. Now imagine that same machine putting in an actual fret slot with that same radius very accurately. Now imagine pressing those frets in with the same amount of pressure with a perfectly radiused call all across the board. In this theoretical perfect world, they should not need leveling. They should be perfect. They should all be the same height, but they're not. And I think one of those reasons could be the tolerances of how these fret wires are extruded. Now I do use a leveling beam. I actually will grind the last few frets for the fall off, so I do that. My method doesn't really deviate a lot from yours, other than psychologically, I have problems with using a leveling beam across the entire board. That's it. All right, let's get to it. All right, so after I'm done spot leveling, what I want to do is remove a lot of the scratches. And so what I do is I'll use the StewMac sandpaper stick, and what I do is go through 2 grits, 600 grit, and then 1200 grit. And then this is great because you can get into all the nooks and crannies everywhere. It's just a great tool. So after I do 600 and 1200 with this stick, then I go through the entire board with sandpaper. So I'll use 2500 sandpaper across the board, back and forth, just like everyone else does. And then I'll up it to, I think this is 3000. Yeah, so 3000, back and forth across the entire board. And then we get to polishing. For polishing, I'm using this. It's a white rouge compound. Now, I never did any research as to which compound to get for which material. I use stainless steel frets, and essentially I just used brute force, got a bunch of these different colors and types and tried them all out until I landed on one that worked. And I like this one for a reason. I like this one because it actually cuts the metal. It doesn't just polish. And cutting the metal ensures I'm really getting rid of every single one of those scratches. But because it cuts the metal, you have to be very careful how long you leave that Dremel tool on there, because if you leave it too long, it'll actually put a dent or a divot in it and lower your fret, which means you'll have to kind of spot level all over again. This is done, by the way. I've already done a first pass with the white compound. And after I do that, I'll double check with the rocker. And so if I'm going through the board double checking and there is a little bit of a rock somewhere, I can take out that rock with just this Dremel tool and that white compound. I literally will leave it on there for like 6 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then that rock is gone. And that takes a little bit of experience. You have to get to know tool, your compound, your material for your frets, and you can actually do some really interesting quick spot leveling just with the Dremel and the compound. So that's kind of a little tip and secret. I never have to go back with sandpaper or file to do any type of minor fret work. I will always just use this, but you have to be sure to kind of blend it in, so you gotta be really careful with it. It takes some practice and experience, but it works. So I already double checked this board with the rocker. Everything is perfectly level. And when I say perfectly level, it is dead flat. Like, there's no high spots, there's no low spots. It's perfect. So I put a check mark by all the frets that I have double checked, and these are great. So now I need to move to the second stage of polishing, and I'll use a liquid polish. This liquid polish will just polish, it won't cut. So now I'll go through this stage, and then once this is done, I can take the tape off. So that's my fret process. It doesn't deviate too much from yours. I do have an aversion to using a fret leveling beam across the whole board, and I'm certainly ideologically opposed to it, but I do use one, I have to. I don't see an alternative. I don't think I'll ever come up with an elegant solution. I'm gonna leave that up to you. Now, I did own a Les Paul once that was plecked. Plecked machines are intriguing. They do the same thing, they grind frets, but they do it very accurately and under tension. We don't have access to pleck machines though, but I think it's the closest thing to an elegant solution. A long time ago I thought maybe I could press frets in all at once, use a softwood so that they sunk into the wood, and the tops would be even, and it would be the bottoms that were irregular. But I never got around to exploring that idea much. In any case, I hope you got something out of this video. Thanks for watching. and take it easy.